Welcome, Holly, Third Doctor, Sarah Jane, K9, Nissa, Fifth Doctor, Turlo, Polly, Erimem, Sixth Doctor, Mel, Frobisher, Evelyn, Seventh Doctor, Ace, Bernice, and Chris. To episode 414 of an Unearthly podcast, streaming live on the 3rd of August, 2021, and featuring Big Finish Zagreus, written by Alan Barnes and Gary Russell, and starring Paul McGann as the Doctor, India Fisher as Charlie, Lala Ward as Romana, and Louise Jameson as Leela, and featuring Nicholas Courtney as the TARDIS. I am Bill Sylvia, the writer in black. With me are Randy Ronson McCulloch
Long episode.
and Thomas Fireheart.
So I think this is about as long as at least one of the Lord of the Rings movies.
Mad Matt is still out. Seems to be improving, so hopefully things are going well. Knock
He's
on wood.
he's finally got his own hospital room.
Yep.
But the show must go on, so we continue to go on.
Yep.
So how's everybody's week been?
Well, I am halfway through an academic conference, which I recently realized that I haven't even posted on LinkedIn about, but that's okay. I'm sure everyone who cares is already there. So I presented some research about the effects of weight on social judgments. Um, and yeah, I'm just taking notes. I'm basically got a good rhythm where I'm spending the same amount of time in the conference as I would if I was there in person, rather than like taking long breaks and then working on it late at night. So it's a good balance. It's very much like if I were traveling, except I don't get to go out and experience a new city.
Mm.
um, I guess with me, it's been interesting because a time capsule that the primary school I went to buried in '99 finally got dug up on the weekend, and what seemingly coinciding with that thing coming out of the ground, suddenly my brain decides to go, hey, remember that the anger issues that you have started that year? So it's been a couple of iffy mental health days since. Oh well.
Man,
At the very least, I've
99.
I've
I
yeah.
was working for the university by that point.
um
Speaking of anger issues.
um yeah, like I mean, thankfully, um there was stuff yesterday, like I played Mario Kart with some people because someone was streaming it. And then streamed a bit on my own, and that person raided me, and a few people actually stuck around until the end, and it was kind of interesting because of all this soap opera shit that happened in the game that I was playing. So that was very like, whoa, okay. Um, Funny thing is the thing that backfired on me with that is that I was that energized by then that I didn't end up getting to sleep until after 3 this morning.
I know that
So
feeling.
like I woke up very groggy and having to be like, oh god, I've still got to listen, like re-listen to this. It's 3.5 hours. Oh god.
Yeah,
And
I was not. This afternoon, after Aaron left for work about 2, I'm like, oh yeah, I have to listen to this. That's going to be the rest of my day.
Mm.
pretty much.
God damn it.
Uh,
Usually I'm like, I'm cool. I can usually wait till about 6, load up an episode of Doctor Who or whatever, get done. Not today,
So,
because it's 3.5 hours.
so you
yeah.
didn't think to sprinkle it throughout your gaming over the past week?
I haven't gamed.
Got you. That would make sense.
Like,
I was doing
and
something
I,
else I'll talk about later.
Okay.
like, I almost thought, oh, I could listen to like part 1 on one day, part 2 on another day, part 3 on another day, and then just never did. I was
Gotcha.
just like, fuck it, I'm just gonna listen to the whole thing at once, or I'm probably not gonna listen to the whole thing. um,
See, the way I usually do it with these audios is I take it into the kitchen and I listen to it while I prep whatever food I'm making for this week. This week,
mm.
I was making tuna salad. It
Which
literally
doesn't take
took.
long to prep.
No, it doesn't. It took me about 15 minutes. Then I made myself a
Mm.
sandwich, sat down and listened to it, and then went back in and laid back down, and I dozed off twice and had to rewind it.
It's like we've definitely come a long way from the canine episodes closer to the start of the season
Yes,
that were only a half hour long.
that's yeah. I get that. That's quite a whiplash. Where I don't really feel it because I normally listen to audiobooks like just as I'm like going back and forth to campus or whatever. Anyway, so this added literally 0 hours to my week. Um, but if that's not already part of your schedule, I can see how it'd be frustrating.
So, Thomas, get you on a plane to Ohio, join you there, we can go kick Bill in the dick.
uh,
Why are you breaking quarantine? Yeah, just for being an asshole, Bill. Not thinking
If
of the rest of us.
if I had realized it was 3 hours long, I would have asked if everybody wanted to split it up.
mm.
But
Ugh.
I did not realize that. Or at least I would have given a heads up like, hey, start listening a week early.
I'm just
um,
like, oh dear God.
I guess at the very least, now that we've got it out of our system, we don't have to worry about it anymore.
Mhm.
True. Aaron made baked ziti this weekend, and it's really good. I've
Any,
been
any special ingredients or just kind of basic?
just a basic baked ziti. Um, Something you got to learn how to make before you try to make it lower. I had a little bit of it. I can't eat too much.
Ah,
Or if I've eaten it, I haven't eaten anything else the rest of the day. I think today I had a small piece and the tuna sandwich I had for lunch.
mm.
But yeah, it's really good. And so now we're gonna take. Now I'm gonna take a look at the ingredients and see what I can replace with lower sodium without compromising on taste too much, because that's the way it
Right.
works. But other than that, I haven't really experimented much this week. Like I said, I made tuna salad today, just so I can have sandwiches.
Hmm.
Toast the bread, put the tuna salad between the pieces of toast. You got yourself a sandwich. And today's sandwich won't be as good as tomorrow's sandwich because I made it today, and usually about 24 hours is needed for it all to blend into that perfect
Ah,
combination of ingredients.
marinates.
Yes.
But I realized I'd been eating a lot of hot dogs lately. So what I did was I bought a veggie platter that you would normally put out at a party, and I just every so often, if I was like, yeah, I need some vegetables today, I'll just pull it out and snack while I'm watching TV, while I'm watching Netflix.
Well, I will never say, it's tuna salad's pretty easy to make. Um, the worst thing you got to do is chop up celery. So,
Hmm.
and there you only need like 2 stalks of celery. So you chop that up, or 1 or 2 stalks, and you chop that up, and you throw a little tuna, some mayonnaise, some relish, some garlic, and some onion, and you mix it in there and add the celery and add some pepper, and voila, tuna salad. And you can be a fancy bastard like me and add cheese to it.
Yeah, I think growing up, I was pretty much taught, okay, tuna salad, it's tuna, mayonnaise, and relish, and you've got your tuna salad.
Yeah, I add a little onion and garlic to give it a little more kick.
Yeah, I can see that.
I use, and I've gotten, fancy since I started making it. I don't use onion anymore. I use shallots, and I use smoked garlic, or excuse me, roasted garlic instead of straight up garlic, just to give it a little more punch. And I don't use regular relish. I use spicy relish.
Nice. Somehow this always becomes this banter session always becomes the food podcast.
Well, yeah,
What?
that's because I don't have many other highlights in my week. I sit here in my cave and I do stuff that I only can talk about during Geek Talk.
Right.
So the only other thing I do is I cook. I cook. I'm on the Cyberpunk podcast, IGM Games. That's basically my life these days.
Mm.
Tomorrow, I don't have to do jack. The day after, I'm in a game. The day after, I GM a game. The day after that, I'm in a game.
Mm.
And then Sunday, I recover from said game because that's a game I actually have to go to and sit in somebody's horrible dining room chair for 3 hours. Unless they make it 5 hours. In which case, I'm a horrible wreck the next day. So much so that I can't make it to my Monday game.
Ah.
Yeah.
Anyway, enough depressing information about my life.
Right.
So, let's go to other stuff. I think I've got one birthday.
Yep.
We have a lost story that we've only heard about, but is actually over a month old. We have one piece of news, and it's big news. And then Bill and I have a little geek talk. And then we're going to go into the episode review, or the episode summary, our review, our final thoughts, and our ratings.
Do we have a review of Shame of Storm Warning, or are you going to hold off on that?
I guess I can see how long we're going, and if we think we're going too long, I'll hold off. But if not, I can do it.
Okay.
All right.
You're ready to give a rating on it?
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
I still only listened to it the once, but I think
Mhm.
it's still fresh enough in my mind at the moment that I don't have to re-listen.
All right.
Sounds good.
So let's go. Our birthday this week is on the 2nd of August. Is Greg Austin, who played Charlie in Class. He's turned 29.
You're old enough to teach the class.
Yeah. So happy birthday, Greg. And that's the only birthday this week. And from there, we move to Lost Stories. And AUP has learned of the death of Ralph Watson, an actor from the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th Doctor eras. Ralph was born in Newcastle, where he lived through World War II. He originally became a teacher and nearly became a minister, but chose instead to become an actor, both on stage and screen. Most of his television roles were bit parts, appearing in single episodes in not only Doctor Who, where he appeared 3 times, but in shows like Dixon of Dock Green, The Bill, Agatha Christie's Poirot, and Casualty. He was also big on the convention circuit and dabbled in politics. Ralph died at home on the 20th of June of this year at the age of 85. He died from complications of cancer. He is survived by his wife, 2 sons, and 1 grandchild. And it took a lot of work to dig up that much information on him, I'm afraid. There was no official obituary I could find. We learned about it from his son basically posting to his Twitter account.
Right.
So, moving on to the big news that we have And this hit, I believe, the day after our last podcast.
The news usually does.
Yeah, it was funny. It always hit on Thursday when we were on Wednesday. And now that we're on Tuesday, it's hitting on Wednesday. It's like they
Good
know
point.
and they're just waiting to go up yours. So the big news is that Jodie Whittaker and Chris Chibnall are leaving Doctor Who next year. It is official. This is no longer rumor.
Yep.
This is actual fact. They'll be leaving following a trio of specials in 2022 that will be airing in the autumn as part of the BBC's centennial celebration. It's been 100 years of the BBC.
So what? By putting it together, because I think they were less clear than they could have been. It seems like we're getting 6 episodes in 2021, and then those 3 specials in 2022.
Correct.
And so that's exactly 9 episodes remaining for that duo.
Yes. They had already planned 2 specials for next year. And then the BBC asked them for one more for a regeneration special. And that's going to be it for Jodie Whittaker and Chibnall.
Which means it's technically possible that the next Doctor's first episode will be on the 60th anniversary, although I hope that's not what happens.
I hope not either.
Yeah. I would hope they get at least a series under their belt before then.
Right, yeah, I would rather a season earlier in the year and then a special afterward.
However, it may be possible that the 60th is missed entirely.
That is possible as well.
As the first of all, there is no announcement on who the new showrunner is going to be. And we honestly don't know if the BBC even has anybody lined up right now.
Yeah.
I know they hired Chris Chibnall for the role because they couldn't find anyone else. That was 5 years ago, and I don't think that situation has changed.
So I was saying, I think I was talking with Thomas about it. Toby Whithouse seems like he would be a great candidate in that he's written some great Doctor Who episodes and has been a showrunner. I know he was a producer, not an EP, just a regular producer of a show as of 2020. So he may be available for an EP position. That's not to say he's necessarily the first choice, but he's the best I can come up with, and I'm obviously not in the industry.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people have been floating Gaddis, but I'm just like,
No.
if he was going to, he would have taken over after Moffat. And he
Correct.
didn't, so I don't see it happening.
the thing is,
his 2 best Doctor Who episodes were mediocre. The best thing ever to come out of him was Sherlock, which was 3 people writing 3 episodes every 3 years.
and he did do a good job on an adventure in space and time.
That's true. That's true.
He did, but
I forgot he did that. That's
wasn't
not fiction.
Yeah, that wasn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a docudrama. So,
That shows he's a Doctor Who fan, but not necessarily whether he's a good writer.
Yep, and I mean, there's several times where I'm pretty sure Moffat said, "Okay, we'll peg you for this if you can come up with a good episode this season," and every time Gaddis failed to deliver.
Right.
I mean, generally, the running gag is that he's a better actor than he is a writer, at least when it comes to Doctor Who.
Right.
Because I mean, that was where we got the Sleep No More, which Gaddis would set him up as a showrunner where he could feature these things, and they bombed horribly.
They were all hyping up a sequel until they saw the ratings.
Yep.
And I know I talked to this about Bill, I think, but it's interesting that the only real clear succession was RTD to Moffat, because I can't figure out who the hell involved with Chibnall would necessarily step up, because most of the people under him were fairly new to this.
Chibnall was, you're saying that Chibnall promoting somebody
Moffat,
of his, yeah.
Yeah, and Moffat to Chibnall was kind of out of left field because Chibnall had done so little main Doctor Who.
there was more of a line from RTD to Chibnall because Chibnall was basically
Mm,
RTD's lieutenant for Torchwood.
Yeah,
yeah.
and they wanted him because at least it was somebody that was involved in the Doctor Who universe production, which was
Mm.
better than they could
And
get
had a hit
anywhere else.
show,
Right.
so.
Yeah, and had a hit show.
Mm.
That said, it doesn't. I mean, it might make it easier to. Well, it might make it easier or harder, but it's not necessarily a great thing that the BBC often seems to look at Doctor Who more as a drama, as a soap opera show, rather than as a
Mm.
sci-fi fantasy show. And I think we've seen
Yeah.
all the flaws of that over the past couple of years.
Yes, they really
Yeah.
need to get some decent sci-fi writers back in
Mhm.
here.
Yeah, like, and the funny thing is I know I talked to Bill about this, and I brought it up in the podcast before, and I'll basically beat the dead horse until it's a freaking pile of mush. But my God, would it be so much better if they just went to the freaking producer script editor split again? Because, like, you look at the third Doctor era, Barry Letts had never been a producer on anything before, and he'd only directed Doctor
Mhm.
Who before. The third
Well,
Doctor's actually not that bad
I,
because
I,
he
I
had
will
Terrence Dicks under him.
I will retaliate
As-
on that and say it really is only necessary if the showrunner knows he's not good at being a script editor.
Mhm.
Mm,
Um, that's the thing. Russell T was a great script editor.
There- There's also I think the biggest difference. I don't even think it's that because there are producers and script editors behind the scenes.
Uh-huh.
The biggest difference is that the producers and script editors back in the day were not allowed to write episodes,
Correct.
whereas now the
mm,
same person who's responsible for, finding directors, finding cast, finding writers, and also writing half the season. I think
yeah,
that is the biggest problem
yeah,
of
pretty
the
much.
of the
It's
post
it,
2005 era, or
yeah,
as Randy has mentioned multiple times, of the post Buffy era of
yeah,
Doctor Who.
Yeah, because it was really
yeah,
Joss Whedon that kind of got that ball rolling.
yeah. It's like it's too much responsibility to put on one person's shoulders. Like, if RTD wasn't had especially well, I mean, like, partly with RTD was also just that he was trying to do too much at once because he was also trying to do
Yeah,
Torchwood
RTD
for
was
Sarah
running three
Jane.
different shows. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and
Yeah,
I
he
mean,
The,
like,
the, the Doctor Who fan in him wouldn't let him be okay with enough. He'd be like, I could make another Doctor
Oh,
Who show.
no, it was even worse than that. Because he was also doing Totally Doctor Who at the time, which was
No,
a.
true.
So he had 4 shows, not to mention Confidential, so 5 shows.
Mhm.
So not only
Mm.
was he burning the candle at both ends, he lit it in the middle too.
Yeah. And, like, and hell, like, Moffat had the
Which
same
is why
problem
which
in
is why
that
I
he
find
was
it
trying to do
funny when people
Sherlock as
compare
well.
RTD and Moffat. It's like RTD
Mm.
was, running all these things per year. Sherlock, if anything, was flitting off to make a movie once every couple of years, basically.
And
It
it's
Mm.
wasn't it wasn't a constant round the
Yeah,
calendar
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
and whenever it
But
did,
even
Doctor Who
then,
production ground to a halt.
Right.
And
mm,
Which
that's the thing. Russell T not only did these 5 shows, he got them all out regular annually, except for that final
mm,
season of Tenants, and that was because Tennant had other obligations.
right. And
yeah.
that was still a half that was yeah, and that was still a half season of longer than usual episodes.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. Um, yeah, it I mean, yeah, I'd shudder to think. Like, I honestly haven't um minded Chibnall's run too much, or at least I've been a lot more forgiving than a lot of people have. Um, but I shudder to think what his run would have been like if he was trying to juggle that and continue to do Broadchurch.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, that would have been insane.
Well, that's
So at least he
why.
at least he was smart
Well,
enough to
at,
not.
at
That
least it would have been the same cast and the same crew for both shows.
well, that's why Moffat wound up doing season 10 of Doctor Who, is because Chibnall
Hmm.
was doing that last season of Broadchurch
Mm.
and
Hmm.
couldn't commit to the show until after that was done.
Hmm.
But
I
I'm
feel
kind of
now that
wondering if he stands down from this, if he'll try to get the crew together to do another season of Broadchurch.
Hmm.
maybe I know his whole thing was I don't think he necessarily wanted to palm Broadchurch off on anyone else, but he also just didn't want to try juggling two
Right.
shows at once.
Yeah, because
Um,
I think whichever studio wanted another season, right?
It
probably
wouldn't surprise me. I think it was ITV.
Assuming
more
that
likely,
wasn't one of
yeah.
those things drummed up by a tabloid
Yeah,
for
I mean,
clicks.
I know he never, I don't think he ever said that he was necessarily like 100% done with
Hmm.
Broadchurch. It was just that if he does any more, it'll be after his stint on Doctor Who is over.
Yeah, that's what I just said. And his stint on Doctor Who is
Yeah,
ending
so,
next year.
so it's like
Once
now
actually
that
his stint technically ends once he gets these 3 specials in the can.
Right.
pretty much, um,
Although he'll
and
stay
yet,
around to hype until they air.
yeah, like I know it was brought up to be kind of interesting that apparently this is the first time where there has been a gap between finding out the showrunner is going to leave and finding out who the new showrunner is.
Yes,
Since apparently every other time it's been this guy is leaving and this guy is taking over.
correct.
Which
Yeah,
which feeds into the rumors that I think I was going to do a rumor mill segment on last week, but forgot. But there's the rumors because I forget. I don't even remember who it was, but some opinion piece basically said because Doctor Who wasn't as good as Loki, that meant it was time for Doctor Who to go on hiatus for another decade. And all of these different sites that barely read the article started going off. Is Doctor Who going to be canceled? So this is more fuel to that fire.
yeah.
uh,
Well, I mean, the BBC has been having hard times finding showrunners for Doctor Who. Um, the Russell T. to Moffat was a non-issue.
Mm-hmm.
hmm,
When he was stepping down, Russell T. talked to Moffat and talked him into it. No problems there. Moffat to Chibnall, however, was more of a long-term negotiation between the BBC and Chibnall.
Mm-hmm.
hmm,
They wanted him, he wouldn't commit. They offered him more money, he still wouldn't commit. You know, it was a whole bunch of back and forths,
hmm,
and I don't think the BBC got the best end of that deal considering how low Doctor Who's ratings have been. And so
hmm.
now, apparently, Jodie and Chibnall both made a 3 series and out pact at the start in 2017.
Which,
Well,
if so, that would imply that Chibnall's bosses at the BBC would likely have known that and hopefully been scouting this whole time.
they probably
Hmm.
tried the proverbial truckload of money.
Mm.
Proverbial meaning this is the BBC and they don't have a truckload of money.
Yeah. Um.
And that's probably part of their problem to find somebody that'll do this is the
hmm,
BBC can't offer much other
Yeah.
than hey,
I.
it's Doctor Who,
Yeah,
you know.
that's I remember Thomas mentioned at one point that they should try to poach the crew of Loki to move from LA to Cardiff and
Hmm.
run Doctor Who, and I was like, yeah, we
Well,
both
yeah.
came away from
To
that
be
discussion
fair,
like that's
yeah.
not happening.
Yeah, to be fair, I was saying it jokingly because it was just the idea of like, ah, yes, do you want to go from a Disney money to a BBC money? It's like, no, thank you.
And again,
Why the hell
from
would you
LA
have?
to Cardiff, I don't think many people would.
Yeah, yeah,
It would take a raise to make that
yeah.
change. I think.
Um, I forget if I discussed this with Bill at all, but I think I've seen people go, oh, why don't they grab someone from Big Finish? Um, to do it. Like, I don't know who because I don't know enough about Big
I
Finish,
think
but
that discussion happens on social media pretty much every time the showrunner changes. Um, and yeah, there's a few. I mean, Big Finish has gone through a few producers that have run produced a range of audio dramas. Um, Gary Russell and Nicholas Briggs are definitely the best well known. I think Jason Haigh-Ellery ran the main range for a while, and there's at least one or two more, especially with how many ranges they've had. Um,
Mm.
But
and people have various opinions on that, but many of them have not done much live action work.
yes, that's the thing. None of
Mm.
them have ever
Yeah.
cut their teeth doing
Mhm.
actual Doctor Who television scripts.
Gary Russell would be the
Mm.
best, would be the closest because he's in addition to operating a Dalek, he was also a script editor under RTD. But I don't, I kind of don't know what he's even doing with his career right now.
And Nick Briggs
Mm.
would be the more well-known option, but again, he's
And,
never actually did a script for Doctor Who.
and and a lot of
Mm.
people don't want him to because his audio drama scripts tend to follow a kind of formula that you can tell he cut his teeth doing fan fiction and just got hired to keep making fan fiction. Because there's some logical inconsistencies that usually cause Randy to take at least 1 star off of his rating, if I remember properly.
Yeah,
By the time we're done with each of his stories.
it wasn't as bad as how much I was starting to deduct for Moffat loops.
I mean, is a Briggs loop that different from a Moffat loop? Well, actually, it's kind of different. Moffat is something comes from nothing. Briggs is the ending is everything was erased. None of the story actually happened.
Yeah, that's Journey to the Center of the TARDIS grade bullshit. Anyway,
um.
so yeah, they actually say in Chibnall's quote, "I wish our successors, whoever the BBC and BBC Studios choose." So they don't even know.
Mm.
Chibnall's just like, "I'm out. Go find somebody else."
uh,
So yeah, they've pretty much left the BBC holding the bag.
mm.
We're gonna have to
I
see
know. Yeah.
what's
I
gonna
will
happen.
say an option that gets floated around a lot but will never happen is Neil Gaiman because it's
I
like
yeah, that's
he's
that's
busy with his own shit. He
Yeah,
that that
doesn't
he
want
just started a new show that
like
he has
two,
said
doesn't
pretty
he?
much has. Well, there's one he has complete creative control over. The other, I think he sold the script,
Mm.
and he might have some rights to it, but he's not directly in charge of that one.
Yeah.
But
'Cause I
God,
know
yeah,
there's
I would
yeah.
have loved to see him as the showrunner for Doctor Who, but yeah, it'll never happen.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, I know he's someone I've floated more as like, well, think about if we were operating on the old Who system and you had like Neil Gaiman working under Chibnall
Hmm.
to kind of help out the less experienced writers.
And that's the thing. If they had known who was the replacement ahead of time, they could have been working with Chibnall this last season
Right.
to get the
Mm.
ropes. And
Yeah.
that's something that, Moffat didn't do with Chibnall either. They
Mm.
just tagged out. When RTD was leaving, Moffat was working closely with RTD. So he was able
Mm.
to just pick up the ball and run. But you've got to admit, when Chibnall took over from Moffat, it was a abrupt change in Doctor Who. It,
Mm.
it didn't feel like the same show. The
Mm.
transition wasn't as smooth. And that's going to be a lot different from this one, which is going to be jarring.
Mm. Which is kind of funny thinking of the transitions of power in um old Who, because I feel like a lot of the time, at least me to work on this other show. Hey Barry, see ya. And but at the same time, with how it works, pretty much all of season 7 was already like set in stone, so he didn't really have much to do
Hmm.
as so much as
I think
oversee. And
I,
it was season 8 that he got his that he really actually put his mark on
I
the show with
I
to
think
start
the
with.
only times it was truly chaotic with Classic Who was during the first Doctor era. Once the first producer left, it was pretty much just like people were coming in and out of that office for whatever reason. And JNT had once Sayward left, had trouble holding down a script editor or even finding one.
Well, yeah, and
Mm.
J&T was one when he took over, he started shaking all the trees.
Right. Like he had Sayward for
I'm
a
not
few seasons, and then after that, he is when he really struck. I think there was at least one year where there was no script editor. I think
I
quite
know.
possibly.
until he got Cart Mill.
I'm pretty sure the behind the scenes stuff for Ford of Doomsday said that the script editor for that was basically like acting script editor, but like an interim script editor while they were finding a proper one or something like that.
No, that
Or
was
they were
that
like
was
script editor for like a very short span of time.
that's like during that's I think around the end of Bidmead's run, yeah.
Hmm.
And then I think they had temporary until Sayward picked up the ball and ran with it.
Hmm.
Anyway, this is tangenting.
Oh yeah, yeah, good point.
Yeah.
Anyway, does anybody else have anything to say about the fact that
Uh,
Jody and Chris are leaving?
Um I'll say this much. I don't while I have not been overly negative on Chibnall's run, I am fine to see him leave, but I am a bit disappointed that even though it's like um she's essentially doing the 3 series and out that pretty much every other New Who actor has done. Um I am sort of disappointed that will be losing her, but oh well. Um I guess it's more so because like this upcoming one is going to be the shortest series yet of New Who. So it's like kind of sucks that she's essentially going out on a
mm,
shorter than usual, even for
right,
the
right.
reduced episodes length. So it's like, oh well.
Even so, she has been the Doctor now for 5 years.
Hmm.
I mean,
If you count, I mean,
I'm not
I
counting
think
2017.
no, I was gonna
20.
say 2020 and 2021 together. I think are less than a year in production hours.
I'm not talking production hours. I'm talking raw time.
Hmm.
When it marks her departure, it is going to say Jodie Whittaker, the Doctor, 2017 to 2022. I
Hmm.
will ignore the 2017 since I believe that's counting the Christmas special she was in
Hmm.
for all of
Yeah.
5 seconds. But still, that
Yeah.
leaves 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, and 2022. And she's leaving at the near the end of 2022 in the autumn.
Hmm.
So yeah, she'll have technically been it for nearly 6 years. Compare that to Tennant, who was 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009.
Hmm.
Raw time, she'll have been the Doctor longer than Tennant.
Yeah.
Matt Smith, 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013. Capaldi, 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017. So she will have been the Doctor the longest raw time out of any New Who Doctors. Not longer than the others combined, but longer than
Hmm.
any single New Who Doctor.
Hmm.
With, of course, Eccleston at the back of the pack.
Hmm.
Yeah. Which is funny because it also means I'm realizing that if you just count years past, that would mean would Chibnall yeah, Chibnall would be at least tied with RTD, I guess, for at least for tenure then as showrunner. Because that would also be 5 years.
Yeah, pretty much. And the thing is, it
Hmm.
doesn't feel like it because, unlike Russell, Chibnall wasn't making Doctor Who every year.
Yeah.
Right.
Like if you go by purely their output by comparison, then Chibnall is the
Mhm.
shortest running
But
showrunner of the show.
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, my main thought about this, other than the showrunner stuff, is looking at the Doctor herself for a second. I know this is probably not going to happen, at least not this time. But I would be tickled if the next Doctor, instead of having a traditional British accent, was somebody who had an accent from a former British colony, just as kind of some recognition there, like Kenya or India. It's probably not going to happen, but
No,
I would love it if it did.
Mm.
I don't know if I could dig that.
Especially Kenya, which was still a colony of Britain when Doctor
Mind
Who
you,
was started.
I don't mind having a doctor who would be, um of somebody of Indian descent or Kenyan descent or something, as long as they still spoke and acted British.
Mm.
But
I mean, like, I feel like the thing is they're always going to have to, even if they have an accent, it's going to be a toned down accent because it's the BBC. Even the Scottish doctors have had to tone their accents down.
except for Capaldi,
Well, even then, he was probably still toning it down somewhat.
not
He was
really.
still just allowed to have a thicker accent than most.
I still remember when Capaldi got said they said he could keep his Scottish accent, and then Tennant's like, why couldn't I? Anyway, so
Yep.
yeah, I expected Whitaker to leave after this season because yeah, the
Mm,
3 series and done kind of
yeah,
thing. I
yeah.
wasn't expecting Chibnall, but I'm not
Mm,
going to complain because I really think he's not done the greatest
mm.
job.
And I mean, you know, I it's a matter of I assume that if he was only ever going to do if like the him basically doing a deal with like making a pact with Jodie of like we'll both do three series and then leave is I basically feel like even Chibnall is kind of aware. It's like I probably shouldn't be doing this, but oh well. I'll like that's why I can buy it is that I can see him going I'll do enough to see one doctor through their tenure and then I'm out.
Well,
Mm,
I
Um
think he said he likes drama more than sci-fi.
yeah, and
yeah,
he's
stands
definitely
to
better at
reason.
writing drama than he is sci-fi.
Considering, was the
Mm,
first thing he wrote for Doctor Who Cyberwoman?
I
probably.
think so. Yes.
Mm.
That's a little bit of an indication there.
Yeah, but he also wrote Countryside, and yeah, that was.
Right.
Mm.
But
Which
that
Was
again
not
is also an
sci-fi.
example because yeah.
That's actually one that could exist in the Broadchurch universe.
just fucking freaky. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Oh, I guess no big Finish news this week.
nope. There was a couple of things that are upcoming, but nothing on new
Mm.
releases. And I got sick of them, reporting up and coming projects like
Hmm.
6 times, like every 2 weeks. Oh yeah, here's the new like cover for this.
Right. It it looks like they're doing weekly sales now, but I'm too broke to take advantage of the Gallifrey sale, at least until after it ends. So,
Anyway, so
Mm.
that'll be the
yep.
news.
Mhm.
Moving on, we have Geek Talk,
Yep.
and Bill wanted to talk about Black Lightning.
Yes. So this was the final season of Black Lightning, season 4. Uh, I was actually a little surprised it made it to 4 seasons. And the thing about Black Lightning, I've kind of said this from the beginning. If it came out 5 years earlier, it would have been probably considered really good and kind of groundbreaking. But coming out when it did as kind of a late Arrowverse edition, it always felt lacking because it handled race, but not in as entertaining a way, or in some cases as powerful a way as Luke Cage. it covered a lot of these urban and legal drama stuff, but not in as good a way as Daredevil. So it always really felt kind of derivative in a way that I don't think it was written in a derivative way, but it wasn't quite as good as what it followed. Um, which is a shame because again, if it came out before Arrow, it probably would have been seen as really groundbreaking. Um, this is partially because Black Lightning himself, the Jefferson Pierce being the character's real name, and his wife are the two of the least likable characters in the show. Because they have that kind of dynamic where they bottle everything up, snap at each other, and then apologize, and then literally the next scene after they apologize, they're fighting again. And while I understand that that might be relatable to some people, it does not make me enjoy seeing these characters on screen. It does not make me necessarily root for them. Um, Really, the character I'm most rooted for was their eldest son or eldest daughter. I don't know why I said why son came out. Um, and she definitely was a great character. The younger daughter was also a good character. Uh, a little less likable for me, but I definitely could get behind her motivations more than the others. Um, as a final season, I do think this wrapped things up very well. It's clear that it wasn't canceled out of nowhere. They dealt with a conflict that had started in season one and brought it to a true close. They also retired the Black Lightning character. So it's of course the other characters in the show that have superpowers could always appear in a future CW crossover. I know the 2021 crossover was canceled for reasons, um, but we could always see Thunder or Lightning show up again. Uh, Even CW seems not to care very much about this to the point of they made a reference to the Flash, but they couldn't even be bothered to have a scene where the red and yellow streak comes through the scene. They just literally had he walked off he walked off screen and then walked back on with the thing the Flash was bringing him, um, which says that you know that's one of the whole points of a shared universe is that you can have those moments of excitement. Um, so again, really, I get what they did with this show, and season four was not the worst season. It might even be one of the top half of the show. Um, but ultimately, I think it's been the weakest of the CW shows through this time. And it just happened to get a fairly good closer.
Okay. Is that everything you have to say?
Yeah.
All right. So, for my part, I decided to go through and rewatch um, the MCU movies. To go, were these movies as good as we remembered them, or are we looking at them, with a touch of nostalgia? That, and I had a lot of time to kill, and I still have a Disney Plus subscription. So, anyway, I thought I'd bring this to you on my thoughts. First of all, I'm going to look at. I'm only going to look at Phase 1 through 3 at this point because Phase 4 is not even complete.
Mm.
So let me take a quick look at Phase 1. I mean, the first movie that came out for the MCU was Iron Man, right?
Yep.
You can't really call that Phase 1. It's more like Phase 0. And, at that point, they had a movie. Paramount had the Iron Man license, decided to make a movie, and then decided, hey, we could do something more with it, and tacked on the concept for a shared universe on an after scene. The movie itself, yes, is as good as I remember. And then, between that, you had The Incredible Hulk. I did not rewatch this one. I remember I liked it, but a lot of people did not.
Yeah, the only reason I would rewatch it now is because She-Hulk is bringing back
Abomination, yeah.
Abomination. So now it's like, okay, I guess we are remembering that movie
Oh,
existed.
so is Shang-Chi. Yeah.
Yeah.
But a lot of people skipped it because it was rebooting a character that had just had a movie 5 years prior.
Yeah, and that was treated like garbage by the director and everything. I remember I liked it because there was a lot of shout outs to the original The Incredible Hulk TV show from the 70s because the lead actor was a huge fan. Unfortunately, the lead actor was also a bit of a prima donna and caused the first of two recasts within the MCU. Main recasts, anyway.
Yeah.
Iron Man 2, that came out the next year, I believe, is
There was a year
Uh,
off, 2010.
yeah.
okay. Also, this is like the true beginning of Phase 1, was Iron Man 2. Also had the second recast, where they recast War Machine.
Yep.
Mm.
Although I've never been quite sure why that one happened.
The War Machine actor wanted basically to be wanted starring role money and possibly billing,
Ah,
and they weren't willing to give
Mm.
him that.
yet.
Mm.
I'm pretty sure he might have
Not over RTD anyway.
not over RTD. Hell
Yeah.
no, but no. I mean, he got at least in the starring tier, in the later Avengers movies when he was
Mm.
actually an Avenger. But
Yeah.
that's neither here nor there. Um, Iron Man 2 is a bit weaker than the first one. It's a little more chaotic. It kind of mires itself down, but it does establish not only Iron Man but War Machine and Black Widow as characters who would be reoccurring. Um, but all in all, it does feel like it drags a little more than the first one. Then you get to the first Thor movie, which is actually pretty fun. I rewatched it. I enjoyed it more than I think I did the first time I watched it, which is rare. Um, all in all, I had fun with that. Captain America was following Thor, and it's okay. I would have to say it's good, but not great. It has some great moments, but it has some other parts where it's just kind of hangs. And then finally, you have the first Avengers movie, which is still pretty much the bar standard for the MCU movies, and that ended Phase 1. Then it also ends Paramount's control of the MCU because right after the Avengers finished production, Disney took over. So starting with Phase 2, all the movies were the Disney Marvel Studios brand, and things kind of develop into the mediocre for a bit. You start out with Iron Man 3, which is okay, but always felt like it's lacking something. I don't know what. I know a lot of people weren't happy with the villain,
Hmm.
but besides that, it just feels like it lacks a certain something. The same holds true with Thor 2. And again, the problem there mostly seems to be the villain. Um, I had a little more fun with this one than I did the first time I was watching it because I knew how garbage they treated Christopher Eccleston's character in this, and therefore could focus on the rest of the movie, which was fairly decent. But again, the villain's lack of emotion seems to kind of spoil the rest of the movie for me. Then you get to Winter Soldier. And again, it's just lacking a little something because it's kind of a downer movie. Shield gets torn apart. They spend half the thing on the run. It's just kind of ho-hum. And there's not a real palpable villain. So you get through that, then you get to Guardians of the Galaxy, and that's a fun movie. You watch that one, you have fun. It's a little chaotic at the end, but still quite enjoyable. Oh crap. Hold on a moment. I think something just froze on my system.
Whoop.
Yeah, my browser crashed.
Oh,
So let me see if I can fix this real quick.
now we're seeing a recurring loop of what I'm
Yes.
assuming is OBS.
Yeah, that's because the browser crashed and didn't know where to go. I'm trying to fix it.
Yep. Yeah,
Give
I
me.
just checked. I just checked to make sure that it was just a browser and not your whole internet.
No.
Well, okay, we're still talking on Discord, but I wasn't clicking that.
Okay, I should have. I'm just gonna put up the generic
Hmm.
Zagreus. Just give me a second. So. There, that should do it. Okay. Yeah, like I said, the browser which is holding everything crashed, so it didn't like the tabs. Anyway, um, Guardians was fun. It was enjoyable. Got a little chaotic at the end, but you liked it. Then the next movie was Age of Ultron, which is a disappointment no matter how you look at it. And again, the villain just wasn't what everybody was expecting because people knew it from the comics. Also, the fact that side characters were a little bland. At that point, they hadn't fleshed out Scarlet Witch any, so she didn't really act worth anything. And then finally, you had Ant-Man, which was good but not great, but kind of felt like a was tacked on to the end of Phase 2 for no other reason than to bring him in at the beginning of Phase 3 in Civil War. And Civil War was probably the best movie the MCU had seen in a few years. It had everything people wanted. Avengers fighting Avengers. It introduced Spider-Man, who then proceeded to get his own movie next, which was decent, but was technically Sony Pictures and not Disney. Then after that, I believe was Guardians 2, which wasn't as good as Guardians 1, but was still enjoyable. Then I believe was Black Panther, which I'm going to get flack for this. I don't think it's good as everybody says it is. Thus said, it is a good movie. I enjoyed it. Probably even a great movie. I just don't believe it's an unbelievable movie.
The order was Civil War, Strange, Guardians
Oh,
2, Homecoming, Ragnarok, Black Panther.
I missed Strange. Okay, I watched them out of order because I was trying to remember the order.
Unfortunately, it's not considered a TV show on Disney Plus. So,
but so Doc Strange was a good movie, but if you take away the visual effects, it's not as good as you remember. I was watching this on a small phone, so I wasn't getting the wow, blow me away effects that you were getting when watching it in theater. So I was able to focus on the plot, and the plot was so-so. And
yeah, it was another origin hero's journey.
Mm-hmm. And again, that's the same with Black Panther. Was you take away the awe-inspiring visual effects and focus on the plot, it's not as good as it was. That said, I enjoyed both movies. I was not distracted at all. And like I said, Guardians 2 had some moments where it hung, but other than that, you enjoyed, the interactions and the dialogue. Then you get up to, I believe the next one is Infinity War.
Yep.
As part one of a two-parter, Infinity War is actually fairly enjoyable, but it's definitely a downer. Especially by the end of it, where you're just kind of like, oh god. And then you've got two movies between that and the closer. You have Ant-Man and the Wasp, and you have Captain Marvel. Ant-Man and the Wasp is not as good as Ant-Man, and I mentioned Ant-Man was good but not great. So this is the low end of good. You can watch it, but what mires it down is it's pretty much bogged down in the continuity of the MCU. They're trying so much to bring in what was in before and link it to what's going on that it loses a bit of it in the middle. Captain Marvel, on the other hand, pretty much is almost tacked into the story to involve her coming in for Endgame. And once you take out the special effects, it's actually kind of a so-so movie. I liked it when I first saw it, didn't like it as much on rewatch. And then you get Endgame, and Endgame, especially when watched with Infinity War, you're kind of just like, you're satisfied by the ending. You're like, if that had been it, if Disney had not made anything more, you would have gone, that was a good movie series, and would have closed. But Disney made more. So, in short, Phase 1 is still the best of the phases. There's not a movie in there that's not worth watching. Phase 2 is the weakest of the phases, where only a couple of movies are better than so-so. And then Phase 3 is better than Phase 2 because you've got a lot of movies that are good but not great. And then you've got Civil War to kick it off, and Infinity War and Endgame to end it off on high notes.
Technically Far From Home, but it's kind of tacked on at the end.
That's an epilogue, and again, that's Sony Pictures.
Right. I know on my first watch, I found Phase 2 to be much stronger than Phase 1. With Phase 3, of course, the high points being the actual Infinity War and Endgame. I'm curious. I haven't rewatched any MCU movies, so I'm kind of curious if I'll feel the same way after a rewatch.
I wasn't going on which were the strongest. I was going for which was the most enjoyable for me.
Right. When I initially watched, by the time Phase 1 started, I was tired of superhero origins and hero's journey. I had seen Spider-Man, I had seen Batman, I had seen X-Men. I was tired of origin stories by 2008, and then they just cranked out like 4 of them in a row. So I was just frustrated with Phase 1 when they first came out.
That never bothered me. I can watch a hero's journey story as long as it's not the same hero. Yeah. I'm sick of them rebooting Batman every 5 years and giving us a Batman origin, which is basically the same. I was getting sick of seeing the Spider-Man origin every few years.
How many times must Uncle Ben, the Waynes, and the House of L die?
Yeah.
Like there's a reason that Homecoming just said that, like, oh yeah, I became Spider-Man like 6 months ago. So we don't have to deal with the Uncle Ben stuff.
Actually, that was in Civil War, but yes.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And that's the thing. With a lot of the stuff that happened in Phase 1, my initial watch of these movies was, I don't know much about this particular hero. I was not a big Iron Man reader, so I did not know, other than what I've read on wiki pages, stuff about his origin, and I enjoyed the fact that they updated it from Vietnam to Afghanistan, because it made sense at the time.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed seeing that origin on the screen for the first time. I enjoyed seeing Thor's origin story. I enjoyed those because those were not the origin stories I had seen before. I enjoyed Captain America for the same reason.
Yeah, it's one of those things where Marvel benefited from having to use, I say lesser known, but in like
B
the
tier
casual fan.
Yeah, B tier,
casual,
not C and D tier, but definitely B.
Like the people like me who didn't know much about comics would see these movies and go, I didn't know who the fuck Iron Man was at all.
Mhm.
I guarantee you. Like, I knew who the X-Men were. I knew who Spider-Man was. I knew who the Hulk was, maybe. Like, oh
All the
yeah, I would have
people
known
that
who the Hulk was, but like,
all
I
the
would have
people they
known
didn't
like
have the
fuck
rights to
all.
anymore.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, so they had to, introduce people to new characters. I mean, like, I know once the MCU got into full swing, I was very excited for Guardians of the Galaxy purely because I had no idea who the hell these people
Yeah,
are.
Mhm.
but yeah, I mean, I was a comic book geek back in the '90s, the early '90s. Back around
Mm,
those times, they had Marvel trading cards. Basically, think baseball cards with Marvel characters.
mm.
So I had a crapload of these cards. So I would read the origin stories on the back of the card, so I knew who Iron Man was because
Now
I
I
had
wonder
his
what
card.
happened to mine, but that's neither here nor there.
But so I knew them from these cards, and so I was impressed enough to see them on the screen.
Mm.
Um, and that feeling hasn't gone away. I say that the Phase 2 is the weakest because it's very doldrummy. It's
I mean,
very kind of bleak, and I really
mm.
felt like the actors weren't acting up to their best.
I know that like at least early phase 2 usually gets crapped on a lot for being seeming like they're going for very gritty
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And then, like, it's kind of funny because then James Gunn came along and goes, no, this is fucking ridiculous. Embrace it.
Yep.
And then Chris Hemsworth is like, yes, I want to do stuff like that, please.
Mm-hmm.
We get Ragnarok and it keeps going from
Oh
there.
yeah, I forgot to mention Ragnarok. Ragnarok's a fucking blast.
Mm.
Ragnarok still blows my mind to this day when Thor gets in that chair and they start playing World of Pure Imagination. My brain still goes, ow, ow. I will say this about this: I liked Jeff Goldblum's character better this time than I did in when I originally watched that movie.
Yeah.
I had actually hated his character. It's like I didn't like how he portrayed it. I didn't like this.
Mm.
Mm,
I sat back and I enjoyed it this time. So
yeah.
it might just be one of those
Yeah.
mood dependent things.
Like it could be that, or just at least the first time, maybe it bugged you that it seemed like it was just Jeff Goldblum being Jeff Goldblum
Yes.
rather than Jeff Goldblum playing a
It,
character.
it
Yes.
it distracted me because I was like, oh, it's another queer-coded villain. He's basically Hades, but in live action. Hades from the Disney movie. Um, which there's some truth in that, but it's also they also put some uniqueness in there. I need to rewatch Ragnarok because season or Act 2 is so like such a what the fuck for the Thor universe that it kind of erased Act 1 from my memory at the time because I was like, what is this? And this, like I was like Jack Skellington walking into Christmas Town.
What's this? What's this?
So I need to rewatch it just so I can solidify Act 1 in my memory properly.
Well, I'm raising a question because I'm reading, upcoming movie summaries for Phase 4. And part of it, I don't know if you've seen the summary for the next Thor movie, is that Jane Foster gets a hold of Mjolnir and becomes Thor.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Yes.
like, how are they going to
Yeah.
do this if
That's
Mjolnir was
that's the big
destroyed?
that's the big thing people are asking about
Mm,
for sure.
Mm-hmm.
yeah. I
And Gore
mean,
the God Butcher is also supposed to be in it.
Yeah, but
yeah.
because technically they had Mjolnir back for Endgame, but they had
But they
taken
gave
it
it
out of
back.
time and returned
Yeah.
it to the timeline where it would have continued to be destroyed. So if it's being reconstituted,
Mm,
are we going to see both Thor and Lady Thor? And if so, will they be a proper
mm.
team rather than
Right. Because
Yeah, like
it's very unlikely that the whole becoming not worthy thing is going to happen in the same way as the comics.
yeah.
yeah.
I know I've talked to to Bill about this before, and I've almost wondered if the idea is if Hemsworth decides to step down, that the idea is that Thor will essentially pass the torch kind of a thing. And if he does stick around, that he will just refer to himself as Odin's son, but it will be more of like passing the mantle on rather than a not worthy thing.
Because as far as I can tell, Hemsworth doesn't want to step down. He's one of the like 2 or 3
Mm.
people that are just like,
Oh yeah,
I'm gonna continue to make
yeah,
movies. Yeah,
yeah. He's basically like, I will keep going until people get sick of me.
yeah.
Essentially.
It's like him and Hawkeye at this point. Anybody else is,
Mm.
yeah, I'll do another movie or two maybe. But these guys are like,
Mm.
yeah, ready to go. Anyway, that was just my
Yep.
what was going to be a quick summary wound up being a bit longer.
You're warming your throat up for the next segment.
Oh god damn it, that's right.
I mean, if we do want to give Randy a slight break, I can try to do a
You
review
you
of.
you do that. You do that. I'm gonna drink some water.
Okay. Does that mean Randy's gonna be the one with the stopwatch? I was about to pull it up if Randy was doing the summary, but
Well, he's going to do
oh, you're saying
Review
he's
of
review
doing
of
the
shame.
shame.
review
Yeah,
of Shame? Oh,
review
Yes.
of
okay.
shame.
So
Yeah,
I should still pull up
just
a
to give it.
stopwatch.
Yeah. um. Yeah. So with God, I mean, it'll be funny because to try and do a review of Shane, just because even if I had listened to Storm Warning like several times, not having a visual to associate moments with makes it a bit harder to recall in that way. But I guess just the setting overall was something I really liked. I was just like, they're just stuck on a zeppelin essentially. Um, and it works for the thing. Uh, least favorite aspect. Ugh. Hmm. I guess like the stuffy military guy actually turning out to still be like, oh well, yes, I did actually want to take over this ship, was very like, god damn it. I was like, because they kind of go back and forth, because he starts off very like boastful and all this, and then you're thinking, oh no, he's got, he served in the military, he's got some PTSD, and he's like, oh, I don't actually want war anymore or whatever. And then they go back on that, and it's like, oh, that's kind of annoying. Would have been nice to have a character arc where a military guy is actually like, no, actually, I don't want to kill anyone anymore. Thank you. Um, God, favorite scene. Hmm. I guess probably just them at the end riding that weird creature back to to try and find the TARDIS is pretty funny.
The
Um,
Vortisaur.
yeah. Least favorite. Hmm. Uh, Honestly, kind of the resolution to the stuff with the aliens to a point, because it's very like, okay, this is just sort of happening. um. Oh well. Um. I guess overall thoughts, it was it was interesting to listen to after Chimes of Midnight. But at the same time, it was like, by virtue of the fact that there was less suspense in that regard. Um
You knew
uh
Charlie was going to survive.
well, yeah. I mean, unless, they pulled some Clara bullshit, but but thankfully they do not seem to be doing that. But yeah, like, it was interesting. It was interesting seeing the first think the first Big Finish story with Paul McGann. It's kind of interesting to see that he's still a bit rough around the edges with this character, but also just because he's barely played him in anything yet.
That might
Because
have
there's
been the
really,
first time. That might have been the first time he did him in audio.
I think so.
I'd say so.
So it would have been his second
I'm
time playing the character, basically.
yeah, and even that was only a one-off TV movie.
Hmm.
So that this basically, at least as far as what little I've listened to so far, they're essentially ignoring for now.
They kind of have to because there's so many rights
Right.
issues.
Well, even then, they're there's like things established in that it's like, okay, well that's clearly not been ever backed up by the show ever
Oh,
since.
the half human on his
Like,
mother's
yeah,
side.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that
um,
I think that's kind of been chalked up to regeneration sickness.
yeah. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if eventually I listen to a Big Finish audio where that comes up, where it's like, oh no, I just I was still a bit loopy.
Chibnall clearly doesn't agree with it.
um yeah, it was an interesting listen. um I am glad that I did listen to it because, of course, stuff moving forward does. It's nicer to have a bit more of the broader scope of what's going on with Charlie. Um, and it'll be interesting to see what happens with her because, again, I know Paul McGann is still going with stuff, but it's obviously I would have to assume by now, given that this was over over it. Well, no, yeah, it's almost a no, yeah, it's almost 2 decades. Damn, since
Yeah.
this story came out. So it's definitely a new companion by now, but
Oh yeah, probably
especially
a few.
given Night of the Doctor, he lists off quite a few. But yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, it was interesting. Um, hmm. As far as a rating goes, oof. Let's see. Hmm. It's one of those funny things where I'm looking at the score I gave Neverland and I'm like, can I technically justify putting that on the same? Because Neverland was a bit wonk. Though, to be fair, with Neverland, most of the issue is pacing more than anything. You know what? I think I'll give it a 4 as well because I feel like there's enough holding it back that giving it giving it a higher score would be a bit much, but I can't give it lower than Neverland.
So the original average was a 4.38.
That
Adding your score brings it to a 4.30.
Yep. So that's going to change. That's going to drop it a point on the overall standings. But
So it is now on par with Big Finish Shada and nothing else from Big Finish.
all right.
Oh, and yep, now I have to pull the stopwatch back up. Okay. Ready when you are.
Okay, go ahead. Hit me with your rhythm stick.
Okay. Three, two, one.
Okay, so we pick off right up where Neverland left off. The Doctor has been infected by a huge amount of anti-time and has decided that he is Zagreus. He hits Charlie and then proceeds to chase her around the TARDIS with her hiding from him until they both essentially get lost. Both start hearing voices. The Doctor's voice coalesces into one of his previous selves, whereas Charlie's coalesces into the Brigadier, both of which are actually aspects of the TARDIS. Charlie gets shown a series of hologram time incidents that basically states that A, Rassilon, way back when he was creating everything to do with the Time Lords, trapped a divergent reality within a time loop, sealed it off, and basically left it to take over at the end of time. Except that in the 1950s, an experiment in England accidentally ripped a hole to this divergent universe briefly, making them aware of us. And then finally, watching them take over at the end of time. The problem is, Rassilon is afraid that they will become so uber powerful that they will wrap a time loop around their universe and destroy it. So, to this end, he is manipulating the anti-time that's taken over both the TARDIS and the Doctor, trying to convince them that they are Zagreus and to convince the TARDIS that it's a free entity, to forge a knife so that the Doctor can go into this divergent universe and kill everything. Well, eventually the Doctor, with the help of 3 previous selves which were hidden in the hollows and go to talk to him, managed to convince him that this is a bad idea. And they confront Rassilon, defy him, but the Doctor's worried about basically being taken over by anti-time at any moment, and has Charlie kill him. She's reluctant at first, but eventually she does. And he then talks to his other selves, regains a bit of his own sanity. The TARDIS regains its own sanity and remerges with itself. And they basically fling Rassilon into the divergent universe. The Doctor, still having the anti-time with him, of course, can't remain in this universe, and so plans to take off in the TARDIS into this divergent universe to try to make peace. And unbeknownst to him, Charlie sneaks on the TARDIS before it leaves. There. How'd I do?
3 minutes and 3 seconds.
Yes!
It is one of those things where there are so many conversations that you basically just go, well, here's where this series of conversations went, here's where these ones went, and here's where these ones went.
Well, yeah, if you tried to summarize all 3 of the scenarios that the TARDIS showed Charlie, there's no way it would have been under 5 minutes. But
Oh, hell no.
Yeah.
I'm like, let's just try to boil this down to brass tacks.
Right.
Okay. So, let's talk about what we liked about this overall. And Thomas, you are first today.
Honestly, I'm going to go with Paul McGann's acting. Like, he is just acting his ass off. In both. Like, just he even like, and especially because this is just pure vocal performances. There's no, not even like animation or anything to help convey. It's just purely through voice, and he just really fucking sells the mental breakdown he's basically having throughout.
All right. Yeah, he does do a great job of that. Bill?
I think I want to say the returning doctors and their chemistry together, especially Colin Baker. He's obviously just completely enjoying himself.
He
But at this
usually
point,
does.
right? But at this point, there's so much chemistry between the returning between the returning doctors. I got it right the first time. And just it kind of grows throughout that final part, and it's just a joy to listen to.
All right. I have to say, I liked all of the returning actors, whether they were doctors or not.
All those people I listed at the beginning of the podcast.
Yes, all of these people that got alternate roles and just completely managed to, some of it, especially when dealing in the amusement park scenario, managed to do it straight. And you
Yeah.
gotta wonder how many outtakes were they where they were just cracking up.
I
Mm.
imagine it was harder if Sophie Aldred actually had to show up to work in a duck costume and Lisa Bowerman was actually dressed as a gazelle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And if India Fisher was actually dressed as a mouse.
Yeah. Uh,
Who directed this episode? It was directed by Gary Russell. I have no idea what it's like when he directs, but he did not act a role.
But considering how ludicrous it was,
mm,
they still managed to do it with just straight face. And
Mhm.
so many of
mm,
them, did, not just one role, but two, and managed to make it so different that I didn't recognize them in their other roles. So,
mm.
Yep.
I mean, I'll give Peter Davison some credit because I did not actually pick up the first listen through that it was him playing the
Really?
priest.
oh, I
Which
did.
which which is funny because the doctors they use their doctor voice the whole time to make it really clear that they're a sort of TARDIS's creation of the doctor, like pulled out of the doctor's
Mm.
mind. Um,
Yeah, like in hindsight, I'm like, how did I miss that the
mhm.
first listen through? But
It's like
yeah.
it's like I missed Nicola Bryant in the first one she was in,
Right.
but
Mm.
I caught her when she was using her companion voice in the second one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Kind of same. Sarah Sutton. I had to look back at the cast list. I did not realize that was her at all. Um,
Mm.
same with any of the ones in that very first scenario. Which the one without a doctor. That has Elizabeth Sladen and everyone. I didn't catch on to
Mm.
any who played any of those.
No, they all sounded too different, so I have to congratulate them on
Mm.
that.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about what we didn't like about it.
Hmm.
And yep, you're up, Thomas.
I have a big thing and a little thing. If you take the big thing before it gets to me.
um, it's funny because even though I would almost say the length just to have something to say, the pacing is handled so well, which was honestly, if I hadn't gone first and someone had taken mine, I probably would have said the pacing is a favorite aspect. But hmm, honestly, yeah, this is kind of hmm. I guess. Oh God, I don't know. I guess the Hmm. It's funny. It's one of those things where like I kind of have something, but it's more of a scene. So I think I'll pass for now, and I might just tag on to something you guys bring up if it's like jogging my memory.
All right, Bill,
Okay.
go ahead.
So what frustrated me was evil TARDIS. And if they had made it partially, they left it a little ambiguous as to how much was anti-time and how much was the TARDIS really wanting revenge for what happened in Neverland. Um, but I just found it impossible to wrap my head around the fact that the TARDIS that we've, you know, been with for all these decades and would continue to be with for several more decades and grown to love was out there trying to murder these former companions. Um, and
Mm,
it really sours it, especially when, it speaks as if, or I guess you could say he, even though the TARDIS is usually characterized as a she. So I'll say, they speak as if it's not the anti-time, it's their own grudge, their own free will, and that makes it hard to like because we have to say, okay, this TARDIS is the same one that's going to be carrying us through, up through the RTD era and beyond.
Yeah, try watching this and The Doctor's Wife back to back.
Right,
yeah,
exactly. Yeah,
right.
it's a challenge there.
Yeah. Like even with that in the back of my mind, I'm like, well, this is a completely different portrayal of a embodiment of the TARDIS to
Yes.
the Doctor's wife.
Mm-hmm. I have to agree there. Um, And since I don't really have anything, Bill, can you say what your other minor nitpick
Sure.
was?
So the small one was the filter they use on John Pertwee's voice. I can bear like maybe 40% of the time I can figure out what he's saying. Most of the time I could not tell what he was saying other than based on how Paul reacted.
Um, yeah, that's because that was taken from some stock audio
Mm. But I
from
thought it
some
was
fan
clearer in the
from.
original.
Not that I'm aware. I don't know. I
Mm.
don't know if it is or not. Some of it might
Mm.
be due to a quality difference. If they tried to play
Right.
it crystal clear, it would have sounded like
But
shit.
I thought I like I mean at least the impression I've gotten, and it's been a while because I think I saw the original featurette, but definitely not in years. But the impression I kind of got was that they had intentionally added this ethereal filter to it to kind of show that it's disembodied. But I cannot make out the words that he's saying, and the first time I listened to this, I just didn't even try to figure out what he was saying because it was just too faint. I don't know if it's my ears or if other people had the same issue.
Yeah, I couldn't make it out either, but
Mm.
and except
Mm.
for later on, I began making out little bits and pieces of what was being said.
Same, yeah.
Mm.
By the way, I do have one complaint.
Ah.
Long, too fucking long. All right, favorite scenes.
Ooh, this is gonna be interesting because I've got a few options. Um, oh, it's just a matter of which one I'm gonna settle on. Because it's funny, because I feel like the ones that are coming to mind first are like, I'm probably gonna steal someone, but oh well. I will go with the sort of inside their own mind conversation between uh 5, 6, 7, and 8
Mm.
when 8 gets stabbed. And it's just sort of like, oh well, there you go. You had a good run, sort of a thing, and they're like coming to terms, realizing,
Yep,
oh yep, this is probably it. Crap.
yep. Now we just gotta wait. Any moment now.
Yeah.
Any moment now. Gee, it's getting awfully
Yeah.
dark.
And honestly, the line that 6 has where it's like, well, you went out better than I did, banging my head on the console. Wow.
And then seven's just
Yeah,
like that's still better than mine.
right.
And 5 says nothing because
Oh, I think what
he
five
had a
six is the
better out.
moment has not been prepared for,
Yeah.
or maybe that was in reference to something else. But
Mm, yeah. It's more like he's referring to the regeneration that birthed him rather than his,
right,
because it's
right.
like, well, I actually had a heroic one, so haha.
Yeah, of the least heroic deaths, those two, 6 bangs his head on the console, regenerates. 7 walks out the door, hit by a
That wasn't even
submachine
what
gun.
killed him. It was, as other people have said, it was basically the U.S. medical system killed him because they were upselling him on an unnecessary procedure, and that procedure didn't work with his anatomy.
Correct. This actually happens, people. Hi, Randy. Do you want a pacemaker? That probably won't do
Oh
anything
yeah,
for you. Yeah.
yep.
Anyway, alright. So, Bill, your favorite scene.
There's definitely a few different types of scene that I'm looking at, um, and I feel like I had it, and then we started talking about the regeneration. Um, Give me a second. I think that's right. Okay, so I think I'm going to go with the Jabberwocky scene because it really explains, it really demonstrates the logic of this story, which is completely batshit wacky, but also has this sort of heroic logic of Doctor Who behind it that kind of holds it all together, like this cosmic force that just, like gravity, that just barely keeps all the pieces from floating into the ether. Um, Plus, it ties up that whole Lewis Carroll theme that's been running through. Um, and gives Charlie a chance to do something other than be like, being shocked or scared or whatever, which is what she spends a lot of the story doing.
All right. So I have two. One, the moment that made me cheer, and the moment that made me laugh.
Okay.
The moment that made me cheer, and this is a short one, was that second where you hear the Sixth Doctor go, "We're in the death zone," and then there's a pause and you hear that horn,
Ah,
and I'm just like, yes, because it was just perfect timing. I think my brain was going, "Please play the horn, please play the horn, please play the horn," and it just goes, and my brain's like, yes.
which I don't remember the horn, and I know Thomas hasn't seen the Five Doctors, so
The
it just
horn.
went
You
over
you
both
you
of our
didn't you
heads.
didn't remember the horn? God, they used it
No,
constantly in the Five Doctors.
that's. I guess that was just not one of the things I was paying attention to.
Well, mind you, I've seen the Five Doctors like 50 times, so.
Like it's one of the episodes I've seen the most of any classic Who episode, but I guess just not nearly as many as you.
Well, you gotta sit down and watch it again now, Bill.
I guess so, yeah.
Just pay attention to the damn horn.
Especially since just last week we were talking about something I was misremembering from that episode. So
And then the one that made me laugh was the doctor in the lead box with the jar of cyanide trying to convince Schrodinger's cat that he was dead.
uh,
It was just one of these moments. But once I get where they're going with it, I'm like, oh my god, really?
I did forget about that aspect of it. That does kind of redeem that sequence, yeah. Where he's like, he's like, I'm dead or you're mad or both.
yeah.
You better check. You might want to. You want to know if you're mad or not. Yeah, it's just hysterical. It's even worse as it works. Okay, least favorite scene.
um, I guess because like, I mean, I guess arguably technically he didn't fully die, and it's how the logic of this works. But the doctor's they assume that the doctor's basically dead, and then Zagreus sort of takes over, and then the doctor is able to like regain control over his mind, and that is like I don't know, but like maybe if it's just that I've been too tired when I've listened to this both times, but it was just kind of like, wait, what? How does that? I mean, it's not as bad as like you know, the Jesus moment in um uh God, what was it again?
Voyage of the Damned.
No, not that one. The one where the like John Sims master dies. Uh,
Oh, Last of the Time Lords.
that's it. Yeah, like the Jesus
There's
moment
a
in that
lot of
where he
Jesus
regains his
moments
youth
in the
is like
Tenth
is
Doctor
very
era.
yeah, but like it's not like that kind of oh god why but it's more just like wait what like seems interesting. I mean, I guess at the time this would have worked, and this is more that it's just confusing to me in hindsight, whereas back then you could have believably assumed, oh shit, is this the end of the Eighth Doctor? Are we just stopping now, sort of a thing when this came out, but like so far removed from it, and Paul McGann is still going. It's like, oh, so he's sort of dead, but now they've got to figure out a way to bring him back. So it just feels like him getting stabbed at all was very like done for shock more than more than anything. Yeah, it's like for whatever reason, I think they even just flat out explain it in the like later, but it's still just like I for whatever reason, it's hard for me to wrap my head around.
All right, Bill.
I was originally going to say the Cheshire Cat thing, but then you reminded me of the redeeming moment that kind of made that whole scene worth it. So it's not as it wasn't as bland as I was about to say it was. So I think I'm going to go with the. I don't. I'm not sure if it would be when they first met or probably shortly afterward. But when Romana just like keeps berating Leela and talking about how stupid she is, I'm like, okay, we get the point. You can kind of move on. Um, I would, I mean, they redeem it later on in the story, but I feel like she belabored that point a bit too much, and it was kind of grating and not doing any favors for her character.
Yeah, it was kind of bitchy.
Mm.
Something you would have expected maybe from Mary Tam's Romana, but not as much Lala Ward's.
Yep. All right, so my least favorite scene is the long, drawn out, elaborate goodbye scene between the Doctor and Charlie because it doesn't amount to anything.
Yeah.
They build it up like a companion goodbye
Mm-hmm.
and then decide to have her go with him anyway. It's like, wow, thank you
Yeah.
for wasting the last 10 minutes of my this audio. You could have made this a bit shorter.
I guess what it really builds up to is Leela announcing that she knows about the back door to the TARDIS and Romana doesn't. That's what it really builds up to, and that's a lot of build up for that.
Yeah, a lot of build. Like I said, a lot of build up for nothing.
Mm.
It just.
I mean, like, it's almost less annoying because it's within the same story that she rejoins rather than like New Who, where they'll like when Amy and Rory get dropped off, and it's like could have acted as a companion exit but isn't. But yeah, it is still like this would have really been much better if it just was a companion exit.
Yeah, that's kind of my thought. Is why waste this on this when you could have done it for a companion exit?
Right.
Mm.
And it's on the one hand, I mean, I haven't seen the following arc, but from my understanding of it, it probably would have been worse with if the Doctor just went into the Divergent universe without Charlie. So I can see why they would want to keep her around, but definitely for the sake of the scene, it would have done better if it was an actual departure.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Don't waste that time if you're not going to make it a departure.
Yeah. And of course it's funny because if they didn't want the Doctor to go into the next arc alone, it would have kind of been funny if they just made a canine tag along. It's like, there you go, he's got canine to talk to now.
Or it, I'm imagine if they had just had Nicholas Courtney as the TARDIS as his companion for the for like the next 3 years.
Would have been interesting. But no, instead they just made us think they were leaving for 10 minutes and then decided to go, nope, nope, nope.
That's one of the reasons I want to listen to Scherzo, because I want to see what happens when the Doctor realizes Charlie is on board the TARDIS.
I can't remember if they directly addressed that or not. It's been a long time since I listened to Scherzo. Anyway, let's go to our final thoughts. Thomas?
As I said before, like, as long as this is, and oh boy, I mean, I'm pretty sure there are some. I'm pretty sure this is longer than most televised stories.
With a few exceptions,
Um,
yes.
yeah, yeah. Because I think this would technically be about equivalent to the length of a 7-parter,
Seven
which
or
there
eight
are a
parter, yeah.
couple. Yeah, so and like there are a couple of those, but like
That's what I was
still,
wondering if, in terms of raw story, if it was as long as the War Games or not.
Not quite.
yeah,
Not
War
quite,
Games
but
is a
getting there.
10-parter, so that'd be longer. Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
like
like
possibly as long as the Silurians.
Or
yeah,
yeah,
like
that
basically
whole season
most
of
of
7-parters.
yeah. It'd be about equivalent length to those, yeah.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, this long as it is, the pacing saves it. Whereas Neverland is shorter than this by like an hour, but the pacing was so off that it was just I kept getting distracted with this. Like this kept my attention. And it might just be that as opposed to with Neverland where it was too unevenly split, I have to believe that the breakdown is that these, even if these aren't exactly, that they're a lot closer in length per part. So it's not as bad. And there's just more going on. Even though a lot of it is still conversational, by virtue of, the audio drama format. Um, yeah, I really enjoyed this. It was interesting. I mean, it is funny to be listening to the 40th anniversary of Doctor Who Big Finish special as my like fourth Big Finish story. Um yeah, it was really interesting. I liked how all I probably would have used this as like a backup favorite aspect, but I do like how basically all of the like 5, 6, and 7 were basically like pastiches of themselves. So like, the one that's usually referred to as like the milk toast doctor is playing a priest. Um the 6 who everyone usually is like, "Oh yeah, he's the asshole."
Is playing an
Playing
egotist.
yeah. And 7 is the
Goof.
carnival barker essentially, and it's like, yeah, it's very early Sylvester McCoy Doctor. So it's like
But
it was funny that they were all essentially playing pastiches of themselves.
although not in costume, they make a point of
Yeah.
mentioning they're all in unique costumes.
Yeah.
I would really love to see the Seventh Doctor's costume for this.
Right.
It might make the Sixth Doctor's costume look sane.
I mean, in my head, I basically picture him dressed as that one guy from Carnival of Monsters who owns like the thing that sets that story off. um, but yeah, I really enjoyed this. I would definitely suggest people check it out. Though if you're like me and you haven't seen much Big Finish, I would definitely ease my way into this and and not just go for this from the get-go. And also potentially if like, I mean, to be fair, I only listened to this the entire way through both times because I had the time. If you don't, then yeah, I would suggest like a part a day to get through it or something like that.
All right.
Uh,
Anything else?
uh oh, and this is also of the Rassilons I've been exposed to, which is basically the new Who ones and this is my favorite Rassilon.
All right. Bill?
Definitely agree on the Rassilons, and yeah, Zagreus sort of assumes both as a 50th main range story and as a 40th anniversary special. It assumes that you've watched more or less 26 seasons of Doctor Who and listened to the entire main range and some Bernie Summerfield audios just for just for good measure. um, which obviously many people listening to it 20 years later will not have all listened to because we're not as starved for Doctor Who content as they were in the 90s. Um, but that said, I think as a celebration of Doctor Who and of Big Finish, I think it's extremely successful. Um, all the cast, the guest cast, and the as companions in different roles are all great. Um, the story is, it's there's nitpicks we could have, but you saw how easy it was for. Well, the hard part of us finding good scenes was narrowing it down, and whereas we kind of struggled to find things we disliked, and that just goes to show how successful they were. And that's extremely difficult when you're trying to work in four doctors uh, into this big of a script and this many companions. Even there were three companions plus K9 plus the TARDIS plus the guests. Uh, and they pulled it all off. I even forgot going into this that this was a backdoor pilot for Gallifrey, which is probably why they spend so much time with Romana and Leela. But then the Gallifrey range was successful as well. But overall, I really enjoy this story. It's definitely better than a lot of the things that lead into it. And yeah, it's just a good time.
All right. So my thoughts: writing is what the fuck. I'm really wondering what kind of drugs they use to come up with some of this. And could they share, please?
LSD, black coffee, and bacon sandwiches.
Acting is top notch. Everybody's putting their hearts into this. They're disguising themselves to the you don't know who they are or landing their roles exactly. Um, Casting is just about perfect. Only a couple of complaints do I really have in those areas, and those are mostly nitpicks. All in all, this is very good, but God, is it long. All right, let's rate it. Thomas.
Ooh. So this is tricky because in my head I was like, I don't know if I can like, is there enough to drag it down, or is the length alone enough to drag it down? And honestly, with how hard it was to find negatives, and there was only really one that I'm like, that's more than a nitpick, but still, it doesn't ruin the overall thing for me. I feel like I'm gonna have to give this a 5.
All right, Bill.
I'm in the same boat that there are things you can take off, but it's at least a 4.75, and on our system that means it's a 5.
All right. Uh, and it comes down to me to whether I can say length alone will give it that bump down.
Keeping in mind that it was made for people who were paying for it, so they probably appreciated getting more bang for the buck.
At the same time, one almost wishes that this was done as Zagreus 1 and Zagreus 2. Just
Mm.
because, I mean, I have to sit down and it's like, I have to take a day to
Mhm.
listen to this.
It wasn't made for podcasts.
It wasn't made for podcasts, and it wasn't, I mean, you know, I'm trying to find things to do while listening to this, and I'm rapidly
It,
running out.
this was meant to last you an entire month.
Apparently.
Pretty much. Yeah.
If so, I kind of wish they'd chunked it up a little more. Given it to you in like half hour bites
Right.
rather
Mm.
than three ginormous
Which is related to what we said about the last two stories.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to be the one detractor and give it a 4.5. But I'm gonna say it's just under 4.75. just because of the length and the fact that they didn't chop it up good enough to make it more digestible.
Mm.
And that will give it to a 4.8 on average.
Which is closer to a 5, so it means that Thomas and I are right.
It is on par with nothing. It is in a Big Finish arc by itself.
Wow.
It is better than Big Finish Class in Remembrance at a 4.67 and is worse than nothing. This is now the highest Big Finish rating we have ever had. So there we go.
I think it deserves that place.
26 out of 397 things reviewed. That is all we have to say about Zagreus.
All right, so please let us know in the comments if you've listened to Zagreus. What do you think of it? Don't forget to like the video and subscribe and ring the bell on YouTube to get our exports every Monday. And follow us on Twitch if you want to see our streams every Tuesday night.
All right, so next time we'll conclude our little travel with the 8th Doctor and Charlie with their first adventure in the Divergent Universe with Big Finish Scherzo. Written by Robert Shearman and starring Paul McGann as the Doctor and India Fisher as Charlie, and I believe that's about it. We will see you next week.
See you then.